Um, well, welcome everyone. I'm Beth Sullenberger, President of Women's City Club. We're excited to have more than 150 people participating tonight in this important program on the history of the collaborative agreement and ongoing work to refresh it. The unjust death of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer has brought the issue of excessive force against people of color to the forefront yet again. Women's City Club acknowledges the pain and suffering experienced by people of color rooted in systemic racism that still survives in this country. Since our founding in 1915, we have worked to build a just and sustainable community where all people are engaged as informed stakeholders in shaping our shared future. We have stood in solidarity with all seeking justice and reform through peaceful protest, informed dialogue, and focused actions. In 1952, Women's City Club picketed with Marion Spencer, civil rights activist and Women's City Club member, to integrate Coney Island's Sunlight Pool. In the mid-1950s, Women's City Club worked with the city to find safe, adequate housing for families forced out of the West End. In the 1970s, we again joined with Marion Spencer, then president of Women's City Club, in the Cincinnati public school desegregation suit that she filed. In 2001, in response to the racial unrest in Cincinnati after the fatal police shooting of unarmed African-American teenager Timothy Thomas, Women's City Club worked with the city to implement the collaborative agreement, a mediated outcome of the ACLU's racial profile lawsuit against the Cincinnati Police Department and the investigation by the U.S. Justice Department into the unwarranted use of force. Women's City Club member Nancy Minson helped the city initiate mental health training in the police academy and chaired the Police Citizen Complaint Authority that resulted from the collaborative agreement. And now, nearly 20 years later, it is important to understand the history of the collaborative agreement, examine the progress we've made, and refresh our commitment to fair police practices and equal justice for all. Tonight's program is the first initiative of Women's City Club's new Social Justice Action Group led by our Vice President for Civic Engagement, David Siders. This group will play a strong role in shaping Women's City Club's programs and policies in the coming months. I especially want to thank those who have made tonight's program possible. Susan Noonan, past president of Women's City Club, who organized it, VP for programs Jeff Dye, and past president Alice Schneider, who are providing technical support and will manage the Q&A that follow the presentations, and our speakers, whom Susan will now introduce.
Thank you, Beth. I just wanted to mention that we are going to have our panelists each speak initially. All the question and answers will come at the end. And please notice that at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A button, whatever you want to call it. And that's where you'll put your questions. We'll be monitoring those. And after each panelist has had a chance to speak, we will then have plenty of time for questions. So tonight we're going to start with the first of our three panelists, activist extraordinaire, Iris Rowley. Iris Shows Rowley was born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio. She is a wife, mother of 3, and grandmother of 5. Iris is the proud partner of Roadshow Awards and Graphics, the only Black-owned laser engraving company in the region. She's an original member of the Cincinnati Black United Front, and as the project manager for the CBUF in November 2000, Iris implemented a plan of action to address the wrongful deaths of 2 unarmed Black men by Cincinnati Police Department. They were the 13th and 14th in the series. Iris and the CBUF led the effort to mobilize Cincinnati's African-American community to report over 400 instances of police misconduct. This documentation was the catalyst that was used to file the class action lawsuit that Beth mentioned against the city of Cincinnati, its police department, and the Fraternal Order of Police in federal court. The co-plaintiff was the ACLU. The lawsuit and eventual settlement in March of 2001 are known as the Historic Collaborative Agreement and the Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Cincinnati and the Department of Justice. It's unique in that this is the only settlement in the country that includes community members to be a part of how public safety is designed and implemented, with a focus on problem solving for communities and police. After Iris, we'll have Al and Colonel Fici, but let's start with Iris. Thank you, Iris.
Thank you. Thank you to the Women's City Club for having us once again talk about something that we in the city of Cincinnati should be very proud of, some things that we did. However, I want to make sure that Beth has her history right. So as you heard Susan read that, do not leave out the Cincinnati Black United Front. We were plaintiffs in that class action lawsuit. We were actually being problem solvers before problem solving. We actually knew what problem solving were. We were trying to stop what we deemed the killing and murders of Black people in the city of Cincinnati by the Cincinnati police. So we actually filed the lawsuit before the civil unrest. We were in federal court in March. And so I just want to make sure that the history reflects the actual work of communities and what we had done. Yes, I am a wife and a mother, just celebrated 26 years of marriage and 20 years in business. I am partner of Roadshow Awards and Graphics, and I am a very engaged taxpayer on several levels. So why the Cincinnati Black United Front came into being is because 14 of 34 downtown restaurants in the year of 2000 decided that they would close during the Macy's Music Fest. For some of you, you would know it as the Jazz Festival. Now it's Procter & Gamble Festival. 14 of those downtown restaurants decided that they would close during the highest revenue generating event that the city has had since the inception of the Music Fest. I do believe last year we brought in $110 million, not counting the $1.5 million in parking and not looking at what was brought into the neighboring cities and towns in Kentucky and Indiana. So when those 14 downtown restaurants decided that they wanted to close, when African Americans were coming to the city, they actually wrote a very nice letter to the chamber saying these are the reasons that they were going to close. So we were looking at systemic racism inside of people who are actually getting our tax dollar to get furniture, fixture, and equipment, facade for their restaurants and places of business in the downtown areas. In the winter of 2000, in November of 2000, we have what we call 2 and 24. That was the deaths of Jeffrey Irons and Roger Owensby Jr. Those two individuals propelled the Black community to go into a state of extreme fear. They came to the Black United Front and asked if we would be courageous enough to figure out just what was going on with the Cincinnati police and the Black community. Now, typically what the Black community would get would just be, you know, everything's all right. We didn't get an investigation or no explanation. We wanted more than that. So the Black United Front, which had been meeting, we continued to meet, and we had these two white guys that would come to our meetings because they knew that we were trying to figure out how to make a better place and space for African Americans in the city of Cincinnati, who too are taxpayers and who pay for public safety. How could we make that system better? What were we doing that we were seeing the deaths at such alarming rate? I think from 1967 to 2000, if we track the history, I think it was 14 unarmed Black men killed at that time. What those two attorneys brought to us was 33 years of racial history between the community and the police from 1967 to 2000. So we had cases of historic civil rights violation. We had the historical piece, but we needed to see what was on the landscape. So what I designed, I became the project manager for the Black United Front and designed a process of which we would collect stories from the community. We were going to get the quantitative data. We wanted to see what was on the horizon, what was truly going on. And because the state statute said you can only go back 2 years, we had the opportunity for the first time ever speaking to the Black community. I set up 5 sites through the community, and the Black United Front manned them, through the city, excuse me. And the Black United Front manned them. Now remember, we're talking about the year of 2001. This was January 2001. And you can look at me, there's nothing about the wintertime that I like. I'm cold now and I got on a jacket and I'm in the house. So, and I'm a cold individual. So there was nothing that I wanted to do in the wintertime. But we set up 5 sites to see what was actually going on with the community and the police. It was one of the most humbling experiences that I had ever experienced in my life. We collected over 400 stories from individuals in the city of Cincinnati. Those people were grandmothers, grandfathers, mothers, fathers, boyfriend, girlfriends, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers who brought their family from far and wide to give us their story. I just want to say, one of the most humbling stories that we had gotten was an elder gentleman who came with a stack of papers and photos. He had a story back from 1969. So it was clear that Cincinnati had an issue. It was clear that the Black community had issues. It was clear that Cincinnati Police Department had an issue. And we were about the business of trying to get to the root causations and trying to figure that out. With those 400 stories, we took them to our attorneys, then Al Gerhardstein, Scott Greenwood, and B. Kenneth L. Lawson to help us determine what would be the next path. Al, are you with us yet? I just want to see if he can we hear you? Al, can he hear us? No? I don't even think he can hear us. Out of those 400 stories, our attorneys whittled them down to 16. Those 16 cases sit and rest inside of the collaborative agreement. The collaborative agreement settled those cases. The collaborative agreement took all of the complaints that we gathered from the community, turned those into trainings, turned some of those trainings into policies, and some of those policies are still on the books today. I want to say most of them are still on the books today. And Lieutenant Colonel Fiji can remind us of what they are. In our first round, I think we were able to do around 200 or so policies and procedures through the collaborative negotiations. It took us 18 months to negotiate that document. Well, both documents. There are 2 documents, the collaborative agreement and the MOA, the Memorandum of Agreement between the city and the federal government, Department of Justice. And that is where the use of force policies rest right there. We took all that, took it back to the community, developed a document with the foundation and the focus of problem solving, not just for police, but for communities as well. We wanted to be instrumental in what policing looked like in our community. We were coming off the heels of what was done in Pittsburgh, and we wanted something different. The Black United Front had the opportunity of voting whether we would just settle the lawsuits or did we want to do something different? And we wanted to do something different, and that is the collaborative agreement. I'm gonna stop there, Susan, and see if Al wants to, if he's with us yet. Susan, you're muted too. You're muted.
You should be able to speak.
She's muted.
I know, mine won't unmute, Jeff. There.
I just unmuted you.
Okay,
Well,
okay,
actually, I asked you to unmute, you unmuted on your own, so I don't know.
okay. I did. I
Can
did.
you ask
All right.
Al again? Ask Al one more time, Jeff, to unmute.
Can you unmute? Can he call, could Al call?
There you go,
There,
say
that-
something.
Did that
Yes,
work?
that works.
There,
All right.
yes.
Well, let's-
Right in the nick of
Okay.
time.
okay,
Wow.
so I'm gonna introduce Al now because we have him. We're so happy to have you. Let me just do a brief intro. For those of you who don't know, Al Gerhardstein, he's the partner in the law firm of Gerhardstein and Branch. He has been an attorney for over 40 years, focusing his practice on civil rights, including police misconduct, race, sex, sexual orientation, disability discrimination, and a lot of other things. He was the lead counsel in the Obergefell versus Hodges, which was the Supreme Court case establishing marriage equality for same-sex couples in all 50 states. Al has served as a lead counsel in numerous civil rights cases. He's a civil rights expert, including one that reformed Ohio's juvenile prisons, but another one that resulted in Cincinnati's collaborative agreement, which has really been cited as a national model for police reform all over the world. Al is the founder of the Ohio Justice and Policy Center, now run by David Singleton, earned his law degree at New York University, and he and his partner litigate causes, not just cases, and they pursue reforms in all of their practice areas. So Al, take it away now that we can hear you. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Susan, and you'll have to give me a warning on time. And thank you, Iris, because it's without your leadership and your tenacity over the last 20 years, the collaborative wouldn't be nearly as strong, and it may not even be around. So you deserve most of the credit for keeping the collaborative in front of the community, and that's just really huge. Let's remind ourselves what the actual terms were. Iris has given you background, and I know that because we've done this talk before, not because I actually heard her. But the consent decree or the settlement agreement that became the collaborative had many of the features that normal police reform consent decrees have. That is, it had features on accountability, which meant that there was use of force reform. It's established the Citizens Complaint Authority, which had, unlike most others, it actually has an independent staff. It has citizens as a board, and most importantly, once the staff makes recommendations to the board then passes on those recommendations and gets them to the decision maker on discipline before that discipline is actually done. And so that's a very big deal. In addition to that, as far as accountability goes, we started a process of rapidly announcing to the community what we know about critical incidents. And that continues to this day. It's a very important feature of this, so that there's not, like you might have seen in Chicago, where the Laquan McDonald tape didn't come out for over a year. I mean, there's none of that goes on in Cincinnati. So in addition to that, as far as accountability goes, we also have an early warning system that is populated with fields that allow supervisors in the police department to know when officers might need an intervention in order to make sure that they are staying on the right track and don't fall into any areas where their judgment will be poor. In addition, the collaborative required bias-free policing and tracking the data so that we know when disparities occur. But the most important feature of the collaborative, and it also called use of force reform, as far as tasers were introduced, less lethal options. We introduced body cams. Well, at the time there were cruiser cams, and now they're body cams. So all toward helping the police be more accountable for their conduct. But the most interesting thing in terms of creativity that happened with the collaborative was the adoption of problem solving. Our theory was, and Iris and the Cincinnati Black United's front instruction was, we just want fewer arrests. Nobody wants to compromise safety, but we don't want enforcement being used all the time, resulting in arrests, and therefore having mass incarceration fed, having Black families disrupted, having communities disrupted. There's got to be a better way. And problem solving was that way, where using the SARA model, we adopted a program where we would study patterns in terms of repeat offenders, repeat victims, repeat locations. We'd use that data to bring together stakeholders around narrowly defined problems. And then those stakeholders would be the contiguous property owners, the neighbors, the nonprofits, the different city agencies that relate to a problem or an area. And then those people would gather and meet and come up with a strategy for addressing the problem that was generating the arrests. And that strategy would be implemented, and then when that strategy is implemented, we'd have a situation where the arrests would go down because the problem was resolved. And then we'd come in and do assessments. We've been doing this at various levels for the last 19 years. And during that time, the number of arrests in Cincinnati have gone down by half. And public safety has continued to improve. So we keep working on problem solving. We keep trying to educate the public about it. And we keep trying to envision ways that we can reduce enforcement while continuing to keep people safe. And that is something, that's a term in our collaborative agreement that really doesn't exist in any of the other 14 consent decrees that are still going from the Justice Department right now. And it's something that we work very hard to maintain. But let me turn for a quick second. You might ask, you know, so what? What's going on now? What is the response to all of the unrest that has occurred? Well, number one, the response in Cincinnati is that IRIS and the Cincinnati Black United Front has actually organized many of the protesters to learn about the collaborative. She supported what we call the leaders of the free world. These are young people that she can tell you much more about, who have solicited over 150 recommendations from community members, organized all kinds of volunteers, created a database of all of their skills and talents, and they all stand ready to do the work, the ongoing work of the collaborative. And it's through that type of work that we've been able to transition from simply implementing the collaborative to embracing all the good ideas that are coming up in the post-Floyd era. So we're very excited about the opportunity to field all of the good ideas that are coming up and fold them into the ongoing work to implement the collaborative. Let me stop there, and I'm sure we can have a good discussion if I ever get unmuted again. Thank you.
Don't mute. Please don't go back.
I won't touch it.
Okay, so that I can tell we're going to have some great questions, but our last panelist is Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Thici, and I'm going to call her Terry because we've been friends for a long time, as Iris and Al and I have. Terry's been with the Cincinnati Police Department for over 29 years, where she has risen to the rank of Assistant Chief. So as Commander of Sport and Administration Bureau, Terry oversees a whole lot of units that are responsible for the logistical needs of the department, and some are very pertinent to tonight's discussion, such as training and development, personnel management, collaborative agreement compliance unit, community relations unit, police records, and information technology. And all of those are very pertinent to what Al and Iris need to happen. Throughout her career, Teresa has had a multitude of assignments. She has experience in every area of the Cincinnati Police Department. And in 2016, Terry was promoted to Assistant Chief. During her time with the police department, she also attended Xavier, where she completed a bachelor's degree and got a master's degree in human resource development. She graduated from a whole lot of law enforcement programs. I'm just going to mention one, the FBI's National Executive Institute, because I know that's an awesome program. And she's also a graduate of We Lead, the Chambers program, Leadership Cincinnati. She and her husband, Bob, live in Miami Township, and they have 4 adult children, 6 grandchildren. And we are so happy to have you here, along with Al and Iris. So it's all yours.
Thank you, Susan. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to participate tonight. And Iris and Al, I just want to say, I'm glad you guys went first. I really enjoyed listening to what you two had to say. I learned something when I hear you guys talk about from 2000 and onward. So thank you very much for that. For example, Iris, I made a note here. I wasn't too much aware of the facts of that lawsuit referenced the Macy's Music Festival. So that's something new I learned today. So just to give you guys a little background, like Susan said, I've been on the police department for 30 years. Back in 2001 time, I was a lieutenant at the inspection section. And the inspection section, one of the many things that unit does is the monitoring for compliance, all the uses of force for compliance with our policies and procedures. And I remember as a lieutenant there, as we were going through the process with the DOJ and the other things that were going on during that time. And Al, you might remember this name. I remember working with Richard Jerome quite frequently when he would come to town. And while people didn't talk about it within the police department, I kind of got the sense that like when the monitoring team was there, somebody was like, oh, the monitors are here. Oh, you know, what are we going to do? You know, what are they going to ding us for? Whatever the case may be. And I remember, you know, being with Richard a couple of days in a row, working on some use of force cases and providing him documentation that, and I think I looked at it a little differently than a lot of my coworkers and even my superiors did at the time. I was more, okay, Richard's here. Let's show him what we do. And, you know, let's show him the documentation. Let's let him, you know, drill down into it. And if he can point something out that we could be doing differently to make us better, let's go for it. You know, let's just go for it. It wasn't, in my opinion, it wasn't a punishment. It wasn't a bad thing to be going through what we were going through, because I think, especially now looking back, it's just made us that much better of a police department. I really, truly believe, and I don't say this because I'm a member of the police department, but I really, truly believe we are one of the best police departments in the country because of our past, because of what we've learned from it, because of how we have grown from it. Whether that growth was voluntary or whether it was from being brought to the table kicking and screaming, doesn't matter. The fact is that we've grown from what the collaborative agreement has taught us, from what the community and the participants in the collaborative agreement have taught us. I'm from a long family line of law enforcement. My father was a captain with the police department. I have several siblings that are in law enforcement, and I have a nephew now that is with the Cincinnati Police Department. But I think the mindset, that some of the buzzwords that you hear, you know, are we guardians or are we warriors? I think the Cincinnati Police Department has definitely grown into the mentality, or we are not warriors for the community. We are guardians of the community. And I am a big believer in people's perceptions are their realities. So if there's members of the community that believe we are not doing something the right way, the just way, whatever you want to say, that the onus is on us to figure out if what their perception is accurate or right. But no matter what, that is the reality in which they are living their lives. And so we have to approach it from that perspective. I've always thought that way. I don't care if it's a minor issue or a major ordeal. If somebody's perception is that this is occurring, then that is the reality in which they live, and we have to approach it from that perspective. So those are just a couple of the things that I wanted to make sure that people knew about the department and about, you know, some of the things that I've experienced. Like I said, I was a lieutenant at the time, so I was not a member of the command staff, so I wasn't in the conversation so much for the collaborative agreement. But I will say that I feel like I personally am very fortunate to be within an organization that is using a collaborative agreement such as ours to kind of govern or guide the way we perform on a daily basis. I don't know if you're going to get into the refresh a little bit later, but it's always good. It's like a checkup. Let's go back and let's see, how are we doing? We might be sitting there thinking we're doing great. We've had this collaborative forever. Boy, we are nailing it. We should be getting 5 stars. But if we turn around and look at Iris, Al, the communities, whomever, they might be rating us completely differently than what we think we were doing. And so that's why I think that the refresh was important to do it when we did it. I think the timing was right. And that's why we are still embarking on the refresh today. So, you have anything else for me, Susan? Or
Okay. So we can have some discussion, or Jeff, questions and answers. We do have a couple of questions, and Jeff, you're muted. So I don't know.
I am now unmuted.
But I mean, this, I think we'll continue the discussion if we go to some of the questions and.
Right. One of the questions that came in from Donna Wynn was, she said, I'm concerned about police disciplinary actions being removed from their record after a few years and thus giving them a clean slate and enabling them to move to another police department, or worse, CPD hires an officer with a history of violence. How does the collaborative agreement address that issue? So I'm not sure if that's for Al or Iris to answer, but
Well,
at it.
let me take a crack at it. The collaborative agreement does not address that issue, and it's something we need to work on. And here's why. It does have a paragraph that says we won't do anything to contradict the FOP agreement with the police department. And the elimination of discipline from the file is a term that's in the FOP agreement. Now, that doesn't mean it can't be changed. And certainly when it comes to people resigning and they're under a cloud because they're in an investigation, it's very important to let the broader public know that someone resigned with a discipline over their heads. The city of, or the metro government in Louisville just entered into an agreement in the Breonna Taylor case, and one of the terms in that agreement is that they are going to, from this point forward, put an indication in their personnel file that someone resigned with discipline pending, or go ahead and finish the investigation so that future employers know that. Presently, Ohio as a state is investigating making the certification for a police officer more rigorous and having a process for decertifying a police officer who gets in trouble and has discipline. And I'm on a committee with the State Bar Association to really change the gap that we have here. So that's a very good issue. It's something that we're taking a new run at as advocates in the community. I don't know whether Colonel TG has anything to add to that, but that's where we stand in terms of the community advocacy on it.
Yeah, sure. So we, like any agency, we have had officers who have either been terminated because of misconduct or elected to resign because of an ongoing investigation. And like Al had said, what we do, and just to give you a snapshot, 9 of my 30 years with the department has spent at internal investigation section at different ranks. So I've handled numerous of these cases, but we would always complete the case and indicate in the file, in the personnel file, if they elected to retire before the case was finished, before punishment or discipline was handed out. We always note in the file that the discipline would be held in abeyance if for some reason something would happen where they tried to come back, or maybe another agency wanted to look at their file. But yeah, we would always finish the case and note it in the jacket what the discipline or what the sustained findings were on the case.
However, that does give us the opportunity to lobby our legislators to negotiate that at contract time. So that's a very good question. And as issues arise throughout the country that we need to address in Cincinnati, that's how you do it.
Thanks, everyone. Those are great responses. Mike Maloney was asking the question, what can community organizations do to help support refreshing the collaborative agreement? So I'm sure there are lots of different organizations that are interested in it.
Well, my first answer to community individuals is this. 1, please get connected with your community councils. And that's where police connect with citizens. And then you find out exactly what's going on in your community to determine what the issues are. Then question the officers that bring you the data and the stats to make sure that they understand what they're talking about and that you have the right resources to address the issues that are going on in your community. Second, read the CA. read the CA, MOA, and read the refresh documents. And then you can join the leaders of the free world. These young folk are doing great work in understanding the information. I know that we are about to start having our MAG meetings. We have one scheduled for Friday. You can monitor the Citizens Complaint Authority meetings to ensure that citizens are being treated fairly there on city cable. But I would encourage people, one, to join their community council so that they can understand what's going on in their communities.
Let me just add to that, that one of the challenges that Iris and I have always had as we try to work with the collaborative over these years is just educating the public about problem solving. It is the opposite of the policing you see on TV. It is hard work. It is data-driven. It is done in a dispassionate, organized way. It's not, cops and robbers. And yet, it'll keep people out of jail much better than anything you see on TV. And it's a better use of all of our time to permanently solve problems. So we need help educating the public about what problem solving is, how it can be used on a day-to-day basis. And this is a job for the community to do, not just, the police department is just one player in a problem solving effort. And so we really need help kind of spreading the word about this philosophy of policing.
And I'm going to add one more thing. The last thing I would add is this: to vote for people who represent this type of change, this type of evolution of how public safety is being done and how you can imagine it should be done. So you have to make sure that you're putting your coloring in that box of people who support this type of work. Not everyone does. So as you see, it's not just about policing, it's about prosecutors, it's about judges, it's about public defenders, it's about a whole host of things that can reimagine what our public safety department looks like in the city of Cincinnati. So utilize this as well.
Yeah, and Iris, if I can, I wanted to also a little bit on what Al said. I think what the problem solving does also is when an issue is resolved through the problem solving method, I think it definitely gives that community a sense of, look what we accomplished, not what the police came in and did for us, but look what we accomplished. And so I think they have more pride in what was accomplished and a better sense of, we could do this again if we have another issue.
I hope that answered them. I hope that wasn't a short answer to a very big question. People often ask, how can I help with the collaborative agreement? And then, oftentimes I spend my time monitoring our legislators, trying to help them not write laws that will sabotage the work of the collaborative agreement. This thing is a constant, it takes constant monitoring and constant evolution. You can't, because it was written in 2001, thanks to our wonderful, fabulously thoughtful attorneys, especially the Al Gerhardstein. But you have to stay with it. We have not left the table. I want people to understand that. Even though we did this work in 2001, that was just the path forward. We've been at the table. We've been at the table working the refresh with Lieutenant Colonel Fiji and others. We have not left this because it takes constant monitoring and evolution of the work. And then if you see something out there in the country that's better than what we're doing in the city of Cincinnati, please let us know. Please, give us that additional tool to make it the way that we see as taxpayers see fit for our public safety department to serve us.
Yeah, and I would say too that, I don't see in any time in the future any city or police leadership abandoning the principles within the collaborative agreement. I think everybody that I know is committed to it, and they have seen the rewards, the dividends that it has paid for the city. So I think it's going to be ongoing for generations.
Well, so Lieutenant Colonel Fiji, let's just address the elephant in the room, because you have major questions from people who want to know about police union, the head of the police union. I'm sorry, Jeff, I don't mean to take over. I was using a series of questions
Oh,
to
no,
rate
it's
candidates.
fine. I was trying to assemble the three questions
Yeah.
together, or they keep
All right.
getting added to. I'm glad
Yeah.
you're- Thank you.
So go ahead, Jeff, do your thing. I just want to get to it so we can address that for people.
Right. Yeah. Initially, a question came in on the chat, and I do want to remind people that the best way to do the questions is using the Q&A link on the bottom of the screen, because that way we make sure we don't miss any of them. I try to look at the chat as well, so just a reminder to the people who joined late. The first question was, what does the panel think of the behavior of Dan Hills? And then some more specific questions. In my opinion, the FOP president seems very divisive. Do you feel he's a good representative of CPD? And then another question also related, the head of the police union is using a series of questions to rate candidates. I hear that he is using this as a way to blackball anyone who supports the collaborative agreement. On Around Cincinnati, he claims that for him, Iris, whom we all love, is the problem, quoting her as accusing police as murderers. So there's a lot of different questions related to that, relating to the union and how it fits in. I guess the next question also, how can we best as a community get involved with the renegotiation of the terms of the city's contract with the FOP? When do the negotiations start? And I think that's pretty much covers it. So that's a lot of questions.
How to get the
All right.
FOP to sit down at the table, you know, and work on the collaborative agreement as they did.
So let me take a crack at it first, and then let's all chime in. Let's remember first that the FOP is a party to the collaborative. It is one of the very few police reform agreements that had the FOP as a party. And we've had years when the FOP leadership was working very closely with all of us to implement the terms of the collaborative, to make sure we do good problem solving, not to use blame, not to lead with blame, but rather to lead with creative ideas. And we want that time back, because if the FOP membership can simply check back in and treat everyone with respect and approach these problems as we are trying to, by collecting data to make sure that people are using force as little as possible, to use enforcement as little as possible, we'll all be getting back to the same page. Unfortunately, Dan Hills, especially his latest missive to all the council members, which starts with, do you agree that there ought to be proactive policing, is directly contrary to the tradition of policing that we've embraced under the collaborative. When we first started this work, there was a unit in Cincinnati called Vortex that had like 50 officers that would do hotspot policing. They would go around and stop at street corners and do zero tolerance or broken window style policing, where people were stopped and frisked, where people were stopped and searched for weapons and drugs, and it was all based on pretext stops, and it was very alienating to the Black community. We've moved away from that, and if that's what proactive policing is to him, you will find the Cincinnati Black United Front and its attorney fighting him every step of the way. And that's unfortunate, because we've rejected that, and that rejection has worked to keep people safe and to make the Black community feel less oppressed. So we don't want to go back to those days, and we don't want him to take council members or police leadership there at all. That said, we're always looking for opportunities to work with the FOP, and we're hoping that there can be constructive engagement on some things. But so far, it's been a rough road under his leadership.
Lieutenant Colonel, you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just take a minute. Iris, then you can jump in. Listening to what Al said, I agree with almost everything you said, Al. I too, as part of the senior command staff of the police department, have frustrating times with the FOP president and some of his public comments, social media posts, things like that, when we're dealing with administrative type issues. So I can only imagine the frustration that the Al and Iris and many others feel when he makes public comments about organizations or the collaborative agreement or whatever the case may be. And Al, like you said, boy, it would be nice to have an FOP that is all in on the collaborative and the efforts. But on the flip side, I also recognize he's the FOP president. His role is what it is. I don't have to like it, but his role, he was voted in as the FOP president. You know, there will be a day where we move on to another FOP president, and you know, we'll see what that brings us. I think one of the question and answers popped up. Somebody was asking, what does FOP stand for? It's the Fraternal Order of Police. So it's the union that represents the sworn members of the Cincinnati Police Department.
So I wouldn't be Iris Rowley if I wasn't honest. Of course, Dan Hill gets on my nerves. And of course, the attacks that Dan Hill has displayed towards me, other Black citizens and Black communities are horrible. It's horrendous. It gets in the way and it sabotages the work of the collaborative agreement. And if I had the power, I would fire him. I would. Because I am extremely worried in this critical time, in this very heated time, that somebody is going to take him up on his words. Just today, he was saying some very unwanted things on WVXU with Councilman Greg Landsman. He has sent my family, my husband, my children over the edge with his comments about me. He has sent the Black community not trusting in the work that was put forth to protect them from that type of rhetoric and that style of policing. However, that is that thin blue line that they have to deal with. They need to deal with Dan Hills. The legislators need to deal with Dan Hills. The mayor needs to deal with Dan Hills. That is not that's not my issue. I'm not, and I ask that you not be intimidated by that style of talk. And I ask that you not allow this work to go to the left, because he is the president of the FOP. I get it, guys. I get it. I get it. People voted him in. So somebody voted that individual with that very bad attitude and that very bad language and that hostile, we can do it alone style of policing. And he cannot. But he is the president of the union. He is not the chief of police. That's what he's not. He's not the chief of police. So there are accountability levels here that we need to ensure that they're doing their jobs, and you need to make sure that they do their jobs. You heard Lieutenant Colonel Fiji. I'm quite sure they wanted to put a muzzle on Dan Hill several times. I've asked previous FOP presidents to speak to him in service to the work. So that the community would believe in this work. At some point, the FOP and its membership is going to have to deal with Dan Hills. He is extremely divisive. He's sabotaging this work. And I'm just grateful that I have family members who are here to protect me, and I have a wonderful attorney. And I'm hopeful that maybe Lieutenant Colonel Fiji can talk some sense to him so we can get back at the table. Somebody should be lobbying the mayor, the city manager, to have better representation from the Fraternal Order of Police at this refresh table.
One loose end from this question is the contract negotiations. Iris, along with the leaders of the free world, have collected model union contract terms and assembled a whole list of things that the community would like to see go into management's positions when the contract negotiations reopen. And those will be presented to the city. And if any of you have ideas that should be part of that, we welcome them. Colonel TG, when is the negotiation? When's the next round of negotiations for the new contract?
Yeah, just so you know, the current contract will expire in May of 21, I believe. Negotiations will start when either the city or the FOP notify the other that they want to embark on contract negotiations. So
that should be pretty soon, right?
yes, if one of the parties, I've seen it done like this early before an expiration, but I've also seen it where it comes down to maybe a month or two before the expiration, before the talks start. I've seen it both ways. You know, one of the things I'd like to at least be able to put out there for everybody to understand is the zero tolerance that Dan talks about. I think that is based on his lack of knowledge of our efforts within the police department. Iris, I'm sorry, and Al, as you know, we don't do the zero tolerance type of activity anymore. We are very data driven, extremely data driven. We use that data for the priority offender strategy that we use, as well as pivot. You know, I said in my opening remarks that I think that our organization is one of the best ones in the country. We've won international awards and national awards for our efforts, Serve, Pivot, many others. And all of that is based on Chief Isaac's support of the collaborative agreement and strategies that work, that are data-driven, and that we believe fall in alignment with the collaborative agreement. So just because the FOP president talks about zero tolerance doesn't mean that that is anybody's mindset within the leadership of the city.
Well, with all due respect, Colonel, it's good that you're supporting the collaborative and management does, but when the FOP president calls out an individual citizen like he has done with Iris, it really should be all hands on deck, and it would be good to hear from the command staff a condemnation of that type of conduct.
Definitely.
We did hear that. We did hear that condemnation from the Sentinels, and I want to say thank you to them. They stood up, not just for Iris Rowley, but for the process, and because it's the right thing to do, and it's so unnecessary. I've had the ability to sit in a room with Dan. We actually negotiated parts of the refresh in the room together. So I know that it's somewhere in there. He has the ability to do it.
Correct. Correct.
Okay, while we're on the topic of the FOP, I think there's one more question, and there probably are some others, but I think then we'll move on to some other topics. It took an economic boycott and federal decree before collaborative parties would sit down and agree. Thereafter, retired Tom Stryker traveled the country to extol the collaborative agreement. As I understand it, the current FOP president walked out of the refresh talks. Then when our city council came forth with a few reforms, Dan Hill's FOP got some press to complain rather than try to get a seat at the table. What, if anything, could be done to get the FOP to the refresh table? And that's kind of sums up a lot of what we've been talking about.
Yeah. Jeff, if I could, like I said, the police administration, the leadership in the department, we've had frustrations with the FOP president also on many different topics. I would ask that our remaining time on this, that we give the topic of the collaborative agreement and the refresh the time it deserves, and not dwell on the FOP president. I think that's going to take away from our purpose here tonight. So I would just like to toss that out to Iris and Al as well, and see if you guys like to get focused back on the collaborative.
Let me say this to anyone that's got, any suggestions or solutions. Just email us at cbufleadersfreeworld@gmail.com. Let's talk about it, and let's be solution oriented. Dan Hills is just the president of the FOP. He is not the chief of police. He's not the entire police department. He's not the refresh or the collaborative agreement. I do want to focus on moving forward. I do understand how people feel. I really get it. I get it more than people thinking, and it's just not a good look, and it's not a good feel to have the FOP president as loud and just unsavory as he is. So yes, please get with us and let's figure out how to fix it.
Okay, so there were a lot of there are a lot of other aspects of the questions. One was, and I lost my place. What about the tool of study circles as a way of engaging communities in current problem solving? I thought those were very effective back in 2001. So this is Jean Nightingale wanting that kind of a collaborative discussion on the collaborative agreement. So,
well, Gail, we've been holding Freedom Fridays, policing in the pandemic since March of this year. We are in a pandemic, so getting in groups physically, wouldn't suggest that, but certainly you can join us on our calls. We go live on Facebook, we do Zoom, we're taking suggestions, and we're talking it out, and we're talking about the collaborative and the MOA and the refresh documents, because remember, it has been almost 20 years. So there are a lot of folks who don't know the provisions, they don't know the history, they don't know what actually happened. And that was some of the things that we found out this summer, is that a lot of folk who were asking for police accountability measures, if you take a look around the country, what they're asking for things that were put in place. Now, I said it earlier, but I'm going to keep saying it because we have some fabulous attorneys with some very forward-thinking ideas. And so when you listen to people, you heard Out speak a little bit about Louisville, Kentucky. They're talking about body-worn cameras. They're talking about civilian oversight. They're talking about chokehold policies ban. All those things we addressed. We were setting a path forward. And what we must do is stay on that path and not allow anyone to take us off of that path and getting our police department to where we believe it should be. So
Iris,
I say come and join us.
Iris, how can people join Freedom Fridays?
If you email us at cbufleaders.freeworld@gmail.com, we will make sure that you get the link. I am going to put it in the Q&A and the chat so that you have it.
thank
We
you.
welcome every and anybody, and even to the person that asked the first question about working on the CA, come and join us and let's figure it out.
Jeff, I think that a while ago there was a question asking, what does the refresh, what issues are in the refresh? What else do we need to do? What are we missing that we haven't done for the collaborative agreement? And we haven't talked much about the refresh and what the issues of that are, or the steps in the refresh. So could somebody address that?
Yeah, I can talk about that. We really noticed that there was a period in 2017 when things seemed to be slipping. There was a lack of good data on disparities. It looked like the early warning system wasn't really being utilized as much as it should be. And the CCA recommendations back to the police department weren't being attended to. So the mayor did agree to initiate a refresh, and we did it. We kicked it off by bringing back 3 members of the monitoring team, including the monitor, Saul Green, who did a comprehensive series of investigations into the status of all the terms of the collaborative and issued a whole series of recommendations, which Harry Black, the city manager at the time, reviewed all of them and said, they're all good recommendations and we ought to implement all of them. So then we started the process, okay, how do we do that? And we even created something called the master plan to start implementing that. Unfortunately, the actual implementation of this green recommendations has gone slowly, and we are impatient. So one of the things that is on the table right now is that you'll notice that there have been a whole bunch of great ideas put forth through various city council resolutions. Greg Landsman's put in a few, and Jean Michel has put in a few. And there is a vehicle for embracing all of those ideas and testing them and working with them using the tools that we set up under the refresh. We're talking to the new city manager about ways to integrate her response to all these ideas with our ongoing work on the refresh. And we're very hopeful that we'll get to a place where we can get back to work and implement those recommendations that are simple, study further those that need more work, and make sure that the collaborative is as vital today as it's been over the 19 years. But we have a lot of work to do. This is not something that happens automatically. It takes daily work, and that's from the community as well as the other collaborative partners. And that means being led by the Managers Advisory Group, the MAG, which itself has needed to be jump-started. So all this is on the table and something we're working hard to do.
And you can find any of these documents on the city's website under the collaborative agreement and the refresh. And please read them. Read the community perceptions survey that was done by the Cincinnati Black United Front. Read the police's survey. Read the criminal justice reform people's survey. Read all of the information. And again, I would encourage people to please join us on Friday so that you can get the fat meat of all of this, because there has been tons of work been done over the past 19 years. I don't want people to think, oh, you wrote that in 2001. And sometimes it frustrates me, and Al knows this, when people say the collaborative was terminated. It ended in 2008. Nothing about fairness and accountability, reciprocity, transparency ever expires. And it is time out when people say that. It often frustrates me when it's something that is put in place to protect Black people, poor people, and different minorities, that people want to put an expiration date on it. It has not expired, and we're not going to allow it to expire. That's why we all entered into this refresh phase together. We just have to make sure that the politics don't get in the way and other things don't get in the way, and the lack of community participation doesn't get in the way. So join us.
Terry, you're muted, Terry. You're muted, Terry. You're on mute.
Uh-oh. Go up to your right corner. Go up to your right corner, go up. Take your pointer and go up.
Who's the host?
Terry
this is what
muted.
happened to me.
Yeah.
Can you take your clicker and go up to the corner? You see that blue box up in the corner?
Yeah, so it's probably what happened to me. Who's the host?
Okay.
Jen.
Okay, here she is.
Okay.
Yeah, I
My
don't
whole
have.
screen went dark, Jeff.
Oh, it's okay.
So just a couple of points I'd like to make is if anybody's familiar with it, that came out, I became familiar with it. If it existed before this, pardon my ignorance, but I became aware of it just after the unrest back in June, of the 8 Can't Wait. So if anybody is listening in, you can go to number 8 can'twait.org. There are 8, I should call them guidelines for what communities would like to see from their police departments. And I'm excited. I'm ecstatic to say that I believe we are one of very few law enforcement agencies that meet all 8 of these guiding principles, or whatever you want to call them.
It was 6 out of 8. I don't think it was all 8. It was 6 out of 8, and that was in 2018. I think they assessed the union contract. It's not current because we're talking to them now.
Yeah, after with the recent unrest, when we went back and revisited, we meet all 8 of them. But it's something I wanted to note about that is, so each morning, one of the things that I get via email is I get an email clips from the Police Executive Research Forum. And ever since the George Floyd incident, this is filled with this newspaper clips and media clips from across the country of, oh, this law enforcement agency has now decided to ban chokeholds. This agency has now implemented a policy of a duty to intervene, and many others. And I have to tell you, I slap my head and go, where have these agencies been for the last 20 years? You know, so if you look at this 8 can't wait, you'll see that, and Iris, you and I can have a further discussion, but we meet those. And I think one of the biggest reasons why we do so well in each of those categories is the steps that we took at the onset of the collaborative agreement. So we haven't had chokeholds, and I can't tell you how long. We haven't been able to fire at a moving vehicle in I can't tell you how long, because that's been our practice for so many years. So it does kind of dumbfound me that there are law enforcement agencies across the country that are so far behind where we are. And I do attribute a lot of that to the collaborative agreement efforts.
And I thank you for that, Lieutenant Colonel Thiegy, and I definitely want to go over it because we're talking with them currently about where we stand in the city of Cincinnati. And that is something that is going across the country. And you're absolutely correct when you say things have progressed because of the collaborative agreement. And that is because it is a progressive document. It takes you into the future. You cannot stay in the past when you read it. Paragraph 13 is the most powerful paragraph inside of the collaborative agreement, outside of the class, and of course, the Cincinnati Black United Front on the first line when you open it up and read it, and along with the ACLU. But it's the most powerful document because it speaks to more than just policing. It talks about other systems that do not work for citizens in the city of Cincinnati, because a lot of things are not just about policing. This, what we talk about, is about poverty, is about transportation, it's about workforce, it's about making a livable wage, access to health care, education. There are a whole host of things. Whoever typed that in about us using the 3 tools in the Civil Rights Handbook, because we thought we were extreme studiers of the civil rights movement. So yes, we did. We had to be in the streets. We had to utilize the federal court. And we also had to enact a sanctions and a boycott. So yes, it took a lot of work to get to this particular point. And we're proud of our work. And we want to continue to move the needle forward. But, you know,
Iris, can you, I'm sorry, I keep wanting to say Al and Iris together, and I'm calling you Alice.
That's okay. That's my friend. You can do that. We're one.
Can you take just a minute to let everybody on the call understand that this collaborative agreement has been a success. We've made extreme progress, and what you and Al have done with that and taking the messaging across the country so that other agencies and other cities and other governments can learn from us as a whole?
Sure. And language is very powerful. So success is determined by the people who said it wasn't well. And that's why we've done up to this date 7 different surveys of the Black community. And we could see some progression, but success, the Black community hasn't said that to me because it's a mixed bag. And as you see, Lieutenant Colonel Thiegy, most of the comments that are in the Q&A and even in the chat are about an individual who's making very unwarranted and unnecessary comments that are taking away from the work. And what I often say to people, and I want to caution everybody on this call, that we didn't get here overnight, meaning we didn't get to 33 years of bad policing. And so it wasn't, I remember, Al, when our first monitoring team told us it was going to take us 10 years to see some substantial change. I cried immediately because my community needed a win right then and there. We were sick and tired of being sick and tired of being sick and tired. We were sick and tired of hearing the cries from the community saying that there was a Vortex unit that was led by someone who's running for office now. We were sick and tired of hearing them say that their children were being harassed. And then we were sick and tired of seeing the murders in the streets. So what I will say is that this particular document, along with the MOU, gives us that path to agreeing together what success looks like. It's not an Iris thing. I can tell you that I've been humbled by the work. It's exhilarating, but it also comes out of a death. It comes out of somebody losing their lives. So it's not like I'm celebrating, I oftentimes don't feel good. It took us, 16 years out to even celebrate the work. Once we had the community police conference, we finally were able just to celebrate it. What it gives you is the opportunity of continuous getting better. And that's what we need to look at. And we need to review the department as it is now, right? And so people need to have that opportunity. But all those other things, it's not just on the FOP president that gets in the way. It's other things that happen outside the city. It's other things that happen with other police municipalities that get in the way. Yes, it is a great document, and if followed, true, and if studied, true, and with participation from all parties, we could finally get to that word success. We've had lots of conversation across the country around the provisions and what have come out of the collaborative. As Lieutenant Colonel Thigi said, people have taken it and they've done their own things, and they have escalated their civilian oversights and other things. I don't know if you all have had a chance to look at the HBO special that I had the great fortune of doing 2 years ago. If you don't like cuss words, don't listen to it. They made me say them. But they actually looked at Cincinnati and said that Cincinnati was a model to the success that Lieutenant Colonel Thigi is talking about. But they also cited other cities that were doing other work as well. And I think that we just need to, be about the business of the work and being able to give the community a chance to say it is a success.
Even though we have reduced arrests by half, for example, we still have a huge disparity against Black people when we do arrests. There's also a disparity when you look at the use of force statistics. There's plenty of work to be done in order to make our policing even more fair, in order to create a public safety system that doesn't rely as heavily on enforcement. If this work interests you at all, I really encourage you to sign up. The email that Iris sent out for joining the Freedom Fridays can also be used to join her database of all the community workers that we've signed up in order to carry on the work. People who want to be involved in problem-solving projects, people who want to work on specific issues. So feel free to follow this up if you're inspired to join up through the Cincinnati Black United Front using that email, and we really encourage you to do that. So thank you.
There's some good questions that I don't want to get past. So Jeff, if you could ask the one about the qualified immunity and Saul Green's analysis just 2 years ago, so we can address that for people, please.
Yeah. I'm trying to come up with a list of ones to catch up and get to, but yes, I will find that one. You said that you have confidence in CPD's commitment to this collaborative agreement. How do you square that with Saul Green's analysis just 2 years ago that the CPD has withdrawn from its commitment to the agreement?
Is that to Lieutenant Colonel?
Yeah, yes.
I guess so.
Jeff, can you repeat, I'm sorry, the first part of that?
Okay, sorry. You said that you have confidence in Cincinnati Police Department's commitment to the collaborative agreement. How do you square that with Saul Green's analysis just 2 years ago that this CPD had withdrawn from its commitment to the agreement?
Okay, so first let me rest assured everybody on the meeting here tonight, the police department is still 100% committed to the collaborative agreement. I think what Saul was talking about was a portion of what he was looking at in the refresh was one of the key components of the collaborative agreement, which was problem solving. And I will readily admit that we had gotten to a point where we were doing problem solving, we weren't doing a good job of documenting it. And so when somebody came in to look at our efforts, we didn't have the documentation to show what we were doing. And that has been one of our big things that we've been driving with the refresh now. In fact, the commitment level from the police and the city administration is such that they hired a manager for criminal justice initiatives, Mr. Jason Cooper, to help us to continue through this commitment and the refresh. Part of that, what Jason is doing and is working with Lieutenant Elena Como in teaching our officers and their supervisors the best way to document your efforts, i.e. the problem solving. We've revamped our problem solving tracking system database. It's more user friendly. It accepts a lot more data, videos, pictures, and such. But yeah, Saul called us out. We weren't doing a good job documenting our problem solving. But if you ask any district commander, they were doing problem solving. We just got away from the documentation of it.
And that fits with two other questions that came in about the data-driven aspect of the work, I believe. So it sounds like you've started to answer that as well. Are there any other things in place that are to improve the data-driven aspect of the work?
Yeah, so we have, what the city did not have with the onset of the collaborative agreement was the Office of Performance and Data Analytics, which is an office within city government. They are very much involved with us in our statistics and putting them up on the portal. So they're very public facing. People can get in and take a look at them. They can look at anything from crime statistics. I believe they recently started posting the citizen complaint authorities completed reports and their findings and such. So yeah, the city has definitely invested in any way that we can gather our data and get it out for the public's viewing.
Al, you want to say something about data?
Well, I do encourage people to go to the City Insights website. It's actually very good, and it is a very strong beginning on having a transparent way to investigate problems and to work on them. So that's been a very, very helpful tool for all of us who work on problem solving.
So let me just say this again, guys, and I know that there are a lot of people, and you're up to 28 questions and answers. What I'm going to ask you to do is those folks who want to join us, you can come be mad with me, but I need solution-oriented problem solvers to help me figure it out, because I wake up mad and I go to bed mad. Lieutenant Colonel Fiji knows it, Al knows it, everybody knows it. But we need to figure this out, and we need not to be intimidated by folk who just don't see your vision. So what? Look at me. Somebody said I wasn't supposed to be free and be able to have this voice and to be able to fight for the freedom of my people and for what type of policing it is that we receive in the city of Cincinnati. But here we are. And so folks have to deal with that. This is 2020. And your voice matters. So if you have any solutions, if you have anything that you want to say in any way, utilize this process of the collaborative agreement and its refresh. Utilize the Cincinnati Black United Front. Utilize the leaders of the free world. Utilize us, and let's come together and make it happen. Email us at cbufleadersfreeworld@gmail.com, and let's be about it, about that work. What you will find, and what I have to be honest to say, is that there are some bright spots inside of the department that do believe in this. I had an officer come up to me a couple of months ago out of the protest and said, "Are you Iris Rowley?" And I was by myself, as I typically am. And I did want to, I don't know, because I don't know who you might be. But how do I hide from all this beautiful, divine person that I am? So I said, "Yeah, I'm Iris." And he shook my hand and he said, "I want to thank you for the work of the collaborative. I want to thank you for making it better for us. I want to thank you for your sacrifice, because it took a lot from community to sit at the table unpaid to do this work." So I am simply saying to those who believe like I do, I tell them all the time, Lieutenant Colonel Fiji can tell you, I'm the boss, I'm the taxpayer. You have to listen to me. We've created a process that they have to listen. They have signed on not once, but twice, to say that this is the process that they want to utilize. Come and join us, and let's make it what you believe it should be.
And if I could, Iris, you're exactly right. And I think once, as law enforcement got past the thought, like you just said, I have to listen to you. Once they get past that and they realize, yes, we do have to listen to you. You have great ideas. And once we collaborate on those ideas, we are better for it. You are better for it. Cincinnati is better for it. One thing I would like to share, Jeff, real quick, is an email address similar to Iris. If anybody has any ideas on what we can do to be better, or any ideas of how we can implement portions of the collaborative agreement, we also have a website, cpdpublicinfo@cincinnati-oh.gov. If they send any ideas to that, Lieutenant Como, those will get passed along to Lieutenant Como, who is in charge of our collaborative refresh efforts.
Thank you so much.
Don't be trying to steal my community people, Lieutenant Colonel.
So we all thought we'd never make it through an hour and a half. Here it is, an hour and a half. There's still so many questions, but I don't think we're going to have
Don't
we're not-
forget to vote.
to ask
Get
all those
to all
questions.
the questions. One question I think was on there that I think would be a good way to finish up, perhaps, is that there was a question about who could help Woman City Club train the community on the problem-solving process. And that it kind of goes along with the more general question of what can Woman City Club, as an organization that is a civic actor in the community, how can it be helpful moving all of this forward?
I'll just take a first stab at that. And I think the biggest thing is, we've talked about it a couple times here this evening, is educating people. Educating what the collaborative agreement is about, educating how they can get involved. And I will say one thing that I have to offer from the police department for anybody is, if you really want to know what your officers are doing, you can ride with an officer. During the pandemic, I think we might have it on hold a little bit, but once we get through this, go out, you can go into your local police station and ask them if you can ride with an officer. They would be more than happy to take you out and show you how they try to do the efforts of the collaborative agreement and anything else that comes across their busy day.
Jeff, and to Susan, let's work together, the Black United Front, the leaders of the free world, and the Women's City Club, to come together to teach broader groups around problem solving using SARA. So I will make that commitment to the community and to that person that asked that question about the Women's City Club. How do we, because we do need to become one in this effort, so we're not so sporadic in hitting people. So let us get our cooler, calmer heads together and figure out an agenda, and we can do this thing. I love doing this work on Zoom. We do it every Friday. Join us on Policing in the Pandemic. We will walk you through problem solving using SARA. We will walk you through the CA, the MOA. We will walk you through the refresh. We will walk you through anything. We will talk about it all. We do not hide from it, the good, bad, ugly, but we need you to be there with us. That is the biggest thing. We need you to be there with us.
I agree, and I will tell you that this is the time to do it. We have already loaded the city manager with a ton of ideas and a lot of great work, people that are energized and ready to dig in. We can use all the help we can get, so just sign up. Thanks, everyone, for all your interest and support.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Women's City Club.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we will continue to do what we do best, which is educate. I think Beth wanted to say, Beth, did you want to end the program? You're on mute. You're on mute. You're muted, Beth. Yeah. But I want to thank Terry and Al and Iris for great participation, great information. And Iris, is that, are you talking about the 4 to 5:30, the happy hour?
Is that what that is? Is that why I've been missing happy hour? Because I've been on Zoom on Fridays.
Yeah, they meet from 4 to 5:30 on Friday afternoon, and that's a tough time for.
Yeah, that's when we meet, 4 to 5:30, and we meet every Friday. We're about this life. We're about this work. We believe in it, and we want people to believe in this process. This is a great process in taking us forward. There are a lot of things that have not been done that we need to do, but we can do it under the collaborative process.
Right, and we have a great command staff right now that is willing to work on the collaborative agreement. So now is the time to do it. We just have to ignore the FOP for a while and go forward. But how can somebody pull out when it was a contract? How can they pull out? I don't get it. So on that note, Beth.
Well, I just want to add my thanks. This is such important work, and Women's City Club will continue to educate people on it and do what we can. And I'd like to ask Jeff if he would like to share our upcoming programs.
I put something in the chat. I listed them. The 2 judicial candidates forums coming up on the 29th and the 1st, September 29th and October 1st. And then we have another forum also related to this on OPC. It's a forum called Recommendations for Criminal Justice Reform. And we'll have David Singleton and Sasha Naiman of the Ohio Justice and Policy Center. So we're really looking forward to that. And then the other thing I'm going to put a quick plug in, because I also have been involved with membership for a while. We are always looking for members of the Women's City Club. So I'm going to put the link there so you can join.
Iris,
I'm sorry, you talking to me, Susan?
you need to join, Iris.
I need to join the Women's City. I need to join something else?
Yeah.
I'd love to have you.
Ooh, yes. And let me just say this. I know Al left, but I do want to thank the Women's City Club. You guys have been here every step of the way, walking this very hard work. It's not easy. It's not been easy for any of us at the table. It's not easy to change culture, opinions, and then it's in changing behaviors. So that is what this work is all about. I don't want to, something that you said, Lieutenant Colonel Thigi, I could spend all day cussing out Dan Hills, but why? But why would I do that? I need to be about the work, and that's how you shut that down. And you lobby your legislators. You make sure that they hold true to what we've signed on to. You make sure that you go to your community councils and you hear from your neighborhood officers as they present these things to your community. You get involved. This is not a spectator sport. This is not throw a stone and then go hide your hand. I wish that I could say that we would, oftentimes, Lieutenant Colonel Thigi, I think we've not, sometimes I feel bad, and I feel bad for my community because I think we should have so much more. But then some days I sit back and I think, my goodness, look at what we have, and other people don't have body-worn cameras. And I'm not interested in putting any more money into the police department's hands. So let me just say that I don't think they need another tool. What I think we need are smart community people, because you're out there. Thoughtful people. I think we need to be innovative. And I think this is what COVID is giving us, the opportunity to be critical thinkers. How do we move this to a space that people are looking at it as something that they can be proud of and that they do call a success to, what Lieutenant Colonel Thigi said. I will tell you, I've gone through everything in my life doing this work, including losing a first cousin to UC police while trying to reform Cincinnati police, including losing my home, including juvenile courts taking my son from me. So the sacrifice is huge. It's not easy being a Black woman trying to change the culture of your police department. But there are individuals that do believe in it. There are individuals that want it. We just need to make sure that we latch onto them and that we make this the biggest, baddest thing that ever stood. How about that? So join us.
Wow, Iris, thank you for sharing your story and your insight and your expertise and persistence. And thank you to
Sorry if I
Al.
went over. Thank you
And
all.
thank you to Colonel Thigi. This has been really fantastic. I have learned a lot. I have a lot more to learn. So do we all. So
Okay, Beth, get that history right.
I will. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Just set me straight. Okay. Well, thank you all. I think it's time to say goodnight.
Good night.
And we'll see you again soon.
Yep.